Okay, hi everyone. We are now on lesson 4, which is it's all about time expressions, no? And also, syempre, hindi lang naman siya about time expression. It also involve how to properly count and also how to express other expressions of times, no? So, syempre, importante po for proceeding to lesson 4, grammar, is you have already mastered the vocabulary. And we have created lots of video about the vocabulary sa lesson 4, which some of you might find it useful, no, in expressing yourself using date, time, calendar, countings, no? So numerals, yan. So importante siya. So before you proceed with this lesson in grammar, it is useful and quite beneficial to first start with the vocabulary first. Okay, so now to move on to our, okay. So in our lesson for today, for this grammar, we were going to study the following. These are very important lesson for you to be able to advance your study and to be able to express yourself. Okay, so number one, Japanese must form of the verb. Number two, how to use particle ni, which is an additional particle. No? And particle kara and made. So these are new particles to be included in your repertoire. So we have ni, kara, and made. Okay, so let's proceed. Okay, so Japanese mass form of the verb is commonly used for formal or polite conversation to superior. Again, Japanese language no is a tier-based language siya. So you have the polite way of saying things. You have, okay, so yung politeness niya, it varies pa, no? You have also the keigo, which is a very polite form of speech that we use for customers, okay, for our customers. And we have less formal or less polite, pero it's some sort of polite pa rin siya, is the use of mass form. So we commonly use this for superiors, no, or our parents or our elders. Okay. Now in Japan, if you're talking in daily basis, no, or day-to-day basis rather, sorry, you're going to use the less formal or the informal form of the verb, which is you have taberu, tabeo. So these are what we call the dictionary form of verb. So for right now, since we're going to study Japanese and to avoid putting yourself into a situation that is less, less conducive for learning and less, of course, setting dictates that we observe caution rather than to, of course, to proceed in parang ang logic kasi it's much more safer to be polite, be over polite rather than to become or perceive rude in Japanese society. So ganun tayo. So we first study the mass form. Later, if there will be time, we're going to study the dictionary form or the informal or hindi naman impolite siya, no? So plain style of conversation. So now we are going to use verb mass form. So, and this is also a congratulations stage for you because it's now time to use verb to express your predicate. Kasi in lesson 1, 2, 3, we only use des and we're only using noun as our predicate. For example, watashi wa sensei des. Sensei is a noun, so wala kang verb doon except for the des, which is basically a an ornament, no? Kahit wala nga des, maintindihan ka. For example, watashi wa sensei. So, gets pa rin siya, di ba? So now, this is the time that we're going to use a complete sentence. Meaning to say, there is a verb into the Japanese sentence. So, kung mawawala yung verb na yon, hindi ka magigets or it's quite difficult to really comprehend what you're trying to say in Japanese, no? So that's the time, level up na tayo. Okay, so let's proceed. So Japanese mass form of the verb is arranged in these two patterns. So you see the flower, or I mean the plant here. So there is a plant, there is a stem and the root. So basically two parts lang siya, stem and roots. So what's the purpose of the root? The root verb contains the meaning of the verb. So meaning to say, if say English kasi, run is yun eh siya, di ba? It contains both the tense of the verb plus the meaning of the verb. But for Japanese, you can separate it. There is a root verb and there is stem verb. So you combine the two, it forms the verb or the Japanese mass form of the verb. Okay, so root contains the verb while the stem contains the time context, whether it's non-past or past, or affirmative or negation, meaning to say you are agreeing or expressing one or expressing the verb, or basically expressing the negative or the do not form of the verb. Okay, so ganun siya. Now to clarify this and also to to put it in context further, I have some sample verbs in your vocabulary which is very useful for this lesson. So we have nemas, okimas, hatarakimas, hajimas, hajimemas, owarimas, benkyoshimas. So notice how I pronounce nemas. Okay, hindi siya nemasu. Nemas. Okay, so because at the end of the u, there is a silent u, no? So nemas, hindi siya nemasu. Okimasu, no, it's okimas. Now, we all sometimes you will hear Japanese that they has hatarikamasu. So it's sometimes they do that for purpose of emphasis, pero in this day-to-day conversation using the Japanese mass form, they often use the silent u pronunciation, hatarakimasu, okay? Kasi hindi naman sa buong sentence mo, you have to emphasize the hatarakimasu, di ba? Siyempre, isang beses lang siya. And of course, it's quite annoying for Japanese to pronounce that or to pronounce this word in that form, no? Medyo ano to, lahat emphasize or parang ganun eh. So kakaroon sila ng anyway, so nemas is to sleep. Okimas is to wake up or gising. Hatarakimas, which is to work, okay, or to labor, okay, magtrabaho. Hajime mas, okay, so from the word hajime, which is to start or to begin. Next is owarimas, which is to finish or to be completed, no? So owarimas, which is, di ba we have an expression hajime mashite, so meaning to say to start, to begin. Hajime is the beginning. Owari, which is finish. Now, owarimas is the verb form of owarimas, or sorry, the verb form of owari, which means to say to be completed or to be finished. Okay, and this one is my favorite. So shimas at the benkyo shimas. Shimas is a special form of the verb. Actually, it's a group 3 in our categorization. So bakit siya special form? Kasi shimas is very useful. You just need to add a noun. Okay, benkyo is a noun which is to study. So benkyo shimas, so mean to say to do the study. Shimas means to say to do the noun or to do this. So if I remove benkyo, I place, for example, drive or unten or drive na lang, English tayo, or katakana. Drive shimasu, which means to say to do the driving, or let's say I'm trading or trading crypto kano or trading the stock market, trading shimas, diba? So you're doing the trading, okay? So that's how you do shimas. Okay, very useful siya. So even you forgot some of your vocabulary, but if you can remember shimas and your Japanese friend or Japanese na kausap mo sa quite handful of English vocabulary, I think this will go a long way. No? So it will really somewhat manage to cross your language gap. Okay, so don't forget shimas is very useful. Okay, so now where's the root and the stem? Okay, so often than not, root contains the meaning, and technically, since it contains the meaning, it means to say it holds the kanji or the Chinese character. Because again, Chinese characters or kanji express the meaning of the word rather than the ginagawa natin sa English or Tagalog, that we express the sound of the word to contain or to hold the meaning. For example, puno, 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 puno. Diba? We have a overflowing, which is puno, And we have puno, which is a tree, right? So the sound contains the meaning. But for Japanese, okay, that kind of problem in written communication is hindi siya nangyayari because each kanji represents a certain meaning. So they don't rely on the sound. Unlike English and Tagalog words, we rely on the sound which is represented by this alphabet, no, or abacada. Sa kanila, it's simple. Okay, so they don't have that kind of confusion because each symbols or each meaning has a different kanji which represents the symbol. So the downside, of course, would be it's really difficult to write the word in kanji because there are 10,000 kanji. So each of that kanji represents something or represents an idea. So syempre, biro mo kanya-kanyang idea, kanya-kanyang symbol. So yun lang yung downside niya. No? But in terms of specific meaning, it's really specific. Okay? So again, root word or a root verb contains the meaning which contains the kanji or kanji component. So for example, okimas, which means to say to wake up, o ki is that letter or the character oki is that blue figure here. Yeah, so ito siya. Oki. Yeah, ito siya. While, sorry. Oki, ito, this is the blue figure here. This one is nemas, sorry. Ne, which is sleep, ne, tapos mas. Oki, o, ito yung o, ki, yeah, ito yung blue. Okay, sorry. Next is, we have hataraki mas. Ito, it's a compounded kanji. Hataraki, ito yung ki, mas. So mean to say, pag pinutol ko siya, I separate the blue to yellow. The yellow stands for the or what we call the stem or the base form. Okay. So if I separate it, so yung example, this one is hataraki, which could be converted into a noun. So parang nagiging noun siya. Okay. Hajime. Ito. Hajime mas. Hajime mas. Hajime, which is yung to begin or to start. O wari, okay, to be done or to be completed if it's the verb, no? Now, if it's a noun, finish or done. Okay, so ganun siya. So that's how important is the root and the base or the stem. Kasi yung root, it contains the meaning and the root also could be converted into noun form of the verb. Okay? May ganun siya tinatawag sa Japanese. But for English, I think medyo parang meron tayo pero parang hindi ganun ka-express. For Japanese, very quite express. No? Ito, this one is the noun. Obviously, the noun, which is benkyo. Yung shi niya, which is expressed as the root. Okay? Siya yung root. Okay? So, okay. Now, since you know what's the context or what's the importance of the root into the Japanese expression, diba? So, alam na natin siya. Root contains the meaning or the imi of the verb, and the root also can be converted into noun. Now, it's important for us to memorize also the root kasi nga ang pinapalitan dito mostly is the stem. Okay, the root stays while the stems could be cut. 'Di ba parang puno siya katulad nitong halaman na to. I think this tree would survive even it's without the stem. Okay, putulin mo yung stem niya, walang dahon, tapos to walang stem or trunk. Pero may root siya, nakabuon pa yung root niya, it will sprung up to life, 'di ba? So after a series of time. So ganun din sa verb, no? So it's very important because the root contains the meaning of the verb. Importante, alam natin yung kung anong verb ang ginagamit. Okay. Ngayon, paano siya gagamitan at kailan siya gagamitin? Sinasagot tayo ng stem. Okay. To answer that, kasi ganito lang naman yan, papalitan mo lang naman yung stem niya. This one is the mas. Okay. So, how to use the proper stem? Okay. Stem form of the verb. Okay. Now, if it's, okay, in Japanese, we do have 2 dimensions of time lang. we have non-past and past. So what do we mean by non-past? So mean to say these are actions that are either in future or in a present tense. Okay, in English kasi tatlo tayo. We have past, present, and future. But for Japanese, just a past and non-past. Tapos or hindi tapos. Okay, so when you say mas, it means to say I will go, or for example, later I will show you. So hindi pa tapos yung action mo or tatapo or plano mo palang gawin. That's affirmative. Now for past, you just add to add mashta. So example, nemas. Okay, this is nemas. Okay, nemas. 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 Okay. Nemas, which means to say, I will sleep or I am sleeping. Okay, tutulog ka na or matutulog ka pala. Now when you say nemashta, naka-slept ka na or natulog ka na, 'di ba? Kasi tapos na eh. Past yun. Okay? Now, of course, just like the English, no, sa English kasi just add to add I don't run or I don't eat. So you just add not or some form of negation or negative expression for English to create the verb as negative. For Japanese, it's quite ang ginagawa natin. Unlike the English, you just had to add another adjective or sorry, some sort of a adjective to connote or yung yun nga mga ganun, no, not or non to connote for that. For Japanese, we add it directly with the verb. So papalitan mo yung stem instead ng masha or mashta, you remove the mas or mashta and then replace it with masen, which is negative. So pag sinabi mong ito siya, diba? Demas, okay. Demas. So papalitan mo yung mas na to, no? So pinalitan mo siya at ginawa mong masen, it means to say hindi ka natulog. Okay, so it means to say I will not sleep or hindi ako natutulog. So that is negation, meaning to say it's the kabaliktaran or the opposite of the verb, or we're trying to portray a verb that is an opposite. Kasi you have to remind yourself na the action, though it's negative, it's still an action. So it's still part of the description. No? And this one, masendeshta, to be honest, medyo I find it very unique for Japanese. Kasi ano siya, it's an expression that the action was not to be done or hindi mo siya ginawa at the past tense. So parang in English parang medyo mahirap siyang i-translate. For me, nahirapan ako i-translate siya. And we rarely use this masendeshta. Mas madalas ginagamit sa tunay na buhay or sa pangkaraniwang buhay is mashta, masen. Masendeshta, it means to say that the action is a negative action or a do not do, and it's committed in the past. Okay, so parang let's try to put some more example dyan. Example ito, kasi hindi siya applicable for nemas eh. So ibig sabihin nemas sa tulog ka, no? Nemasen deshta. Nemasen, which I don't sleep or I will not sleep. Now, deshta, it's past tense. I don't sleep. So parang I don't sleep. So meaning to say, hindi ka natulog. Hindi ka natulog. So meaning to say, maaring you're referring to a certain time context. Let's say yesterday, which is a past. Okay. Yesterday, it is a past. Tapos you're trying to imply that you didn't sleep kahapon. Okay? Or hindi ka natulog kahapon. So the English equivalent would be I didn't sleep. Parang ganun. I didn't sleep. Parang hindi ako natulog kahapon. So it's some support of a negative in a past time context, you know. So rarely used, but of course it's really useful to understand this context. Now, syempre, di ba sa lesson 1, 2, and 3 natin, puro tayo des. Syempre, may equivalent because des is a verb. Okay, des is a verb. So, meron din siyang verb form. Okay. Of course, ang emphasize ko is, of course, mas because Mas marami kasing verb na tayo magagamit dahil this is the base eh. Okay? In des, fix na siya. As in des assumes this form consistently. Okay? So ito siya. So for des, we have the des which is referring to affirmative, non-past. Deshta referring to affirmative. For example, Watashi wa Argel, Watashi wa Argel des. Ako si Argel. So mean to say, currently and in the future, I will be Argel. Next. Sensei, watashi wa sensei deshita. Meaning to say, ako ay naging teacher noon. Okay. Watashi wa sensei deshita. I was a teacher before. So meaning to say, the action was already completed. It was committed in the past. And of course, in the current situation and the future situation, you see no prospect of being a teacher. Okay. Kasi deshita na siya. Okay. Next. Dewa arimasen. Watashi wa bengoshi dewa arimasen. I'm not a lawyer. So dewa arimasen means to say that currently and the future, you are not a lawyer. I mean to say you don't see yourself currently and the future as a lawyer. Now, this one is again just like the masendeshta, okay? Masendeshta, which gives me a hard time. So, ganun din siya. It's an action of negative, but it's committed in the past. For example, let's try. Watashi wa bengoshi dewa arimasendeshita. So, I didn't become a lawyer. I didn't become a lawyer. So, parang nag-try ka pero hindi ka naging lawyer. Let's say, nag-try ka mag-aral ng law pero hindi ka naging abogado, bumaksak ka sa bar exam. So, some sort of like that, no? So, I guess this one is really tricky for Westerner. So, medyo dito challenge natin. Pero again, we mainly use des, deshta, and dewarimasen. But of course, when you speak with native Japanese, it's part of their lingo de franca, or meaning to say part of their language kasi itong dewarimasen deshta. Yun ang expression nila. So it means to say it happens in the past that it's not, or it's the opposite of the verb. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so to put it in more precise examples, no? So I have these examples. Hatarakimasu, or means to say work or will work. Okay. Now, if you ask me, do you like to work or will you go to work? Let's say my answer is negation or not, or negative. When I say hatarakimasen, which means to say not working, or currently I'm not working, or in the future I will not work. Okay, parang ganun. What about in the past? Hatarakimashita. So meaning to say you have work with ed. And this one, again, it's quite tricky. Let's put it in a context. Hatarakimasen deshita. For example, last year or last year. Last month. Sengatsu wa hatarakimasen deshita. So meaning to say I didn't work last month. Ganun, no? I didn't work last month. Okay. So may past tense na yung verb tapos negative pa siya. Okay? So that is one of my examples for this Japanese past form. So at first it might look tricky, pero eventually if you're nasanay and you become familiar with it, it's no problem with you. And of course, lesson 4 is essential for you to proceed with the previous or next succeeding lessons natin, because without proper knowledge of this form, you're at loss in succeeding lessons. Okay, so kindly put yourself into a diligent mode here. Next. What about the use of particle ni for time expression? Okay, we have the vocabulary, and the vocabulary is full of time expressions. No, before the time expression, it also is full of numerals. Okay, so ngayon gagamitin na natin time expression na yan, and of course it's totally nonsense if we just memorize it without properly incorporating it in a sentence. Okay, to do that, we need to input particle ni. Example, may asa rokuji ni hatarakimasu. So it means to say, may asa, which is a time expression for every morning of, syempre, every morning na yan. Rokuji, it means to say gosen, right? So hindi ko na-express yung gosen kasi may asa ka na. May asa, rokuji ni hatarakimasu. Okay. So to translate, I'm working every morning at 6 a.m. So that's my translation. So question, sir. So napulot yung I am. Okay. Diba if you remember lesson 1, which states that a topic could be omitted as long as it's could be understood by the listener or the reader within the context of the sentence. Since it is a statement and you're reading this statement, it seems to be that you're talking about yourself. So if you're in doubt, you're doubtful that your listener might associate this expression to somebody else besides yourself, you must use a topic marker wa. Okay. For example, watashi wa mai asa rokuji ni hatarakimasu. So syempre, talagang ikaw yun. It's the sentence about yourself. Okay? So now, obviously in Japan, since it's quite logical to assume that you're the one stating this statement, it refers to you. Okay? So hindi na natin siya nilagay. So that is what we call omission of the topic. So that is in lesson 1. Okay? Just to refresh you. Okay. So going back, may asa rokuji ni hatarakimasu. Okay. So what you did notice? So ilan time expression that we have here in the sentence? Of course, we have one obvious time expression, which is rokuji, and this one is also a time expression, may asa. May means every, asa morning, every morning. Okay, so we have 2 time expression here. So for this one, okay, here's the rule. So if you going to use specific time, you need to use particle ni. So example, considering may asa, wala yung may asa. Just reading it. Rokuji ni hatarakimasu. So pag sinabi mong rokuji hatarakimasu, that's grammatically wrong. Okay? Because there is no particle ni. So ni here acts at the at. Diba? Para siyang English preposition at. Okay? So that's the function of the particle ni here. Okay? So, again, it's very important to remember this. Okay? Okay. Next is, what about may asa? Diba parang ang may asa, sir, it's time din. Pero hindi niyo siya nilagay ng particle ni. It should be may asa ni rokuji ni hatarakimasu. Okay? Okay, for that, we have another rule. Okay, ito yung rule natin. For unspecified time, so meaning to say, these are time expressions that without any, okay, ito na lang. So we have 2 times of time, diba? So again, sa vocabulary, diba, ni-specify ko yung time natin, meron tayong period of time and duration. So for example, rokuji, it means to say period siya kasi it's definite point of time or point of clock siya or point of reference of time. Duration, how long naman? Parang range naman siya, no? Range. Dito, for using particle ni for time expression, to avoid confusion and to force to mapadali ang buhay natin, we have specific time and unspecific time. So how would I know if it's a specific time or unspecific? Simply lang, if there's a number in the time expression, it means to say it's a specific time. Okay. Again, if there's a number or numeral in a time expression, for example, rokuji, another example, sanjugo fun, which is 30, another example, suitachi, one or the first day, another example, ishukan, so that's first week, diba? So this contains all numbers, no, or numeral. So these are specific time. For you to use that into a sentence, especially with a verb, okay? Especially with a verb, verb must, no? For this, okay lang. For example, may asa rokuji Rokuji des. Parang doesn't make sense because, again, yung verb mo kasi dito, yun yung predicate mo. Parang it describe the sentence, di ba? So for that, for using this, pwede naman siya kahit wala ni. Pero this time, lesson 4, if you're going to use verb mass form or going to use a sentence that uses or utilize verb as your predicate, and you're going to use time expression with that, you have to make sure if it's a specific time or unspecific time. For specific time, you have to add particle ni. So it makes the sentence, or it marks particle, or it marks the time as the specific time. Okay? Or it means to say para siyang English equivalent of at. Okay? So klaro naman siya. Next. Okay. And we have to make sure that our time expression should agree with the verb. Just like the English, di ba? Hindi ka pwedeng nagsasabing, oh, tomorrow meet you. Parang wrong, grammar wrong siya kasi tomorrow I will meet you. You have to use will, di ba? So that's the English one. For Japanese, you have to make sure that your time expression should agree on the verb. For example, this one, may asa rokuji ni hatarakimashita. Oops. If it's really hatarakimashita, which means to say the action was already completed, why use in ongoing time expression? May asa. Kasi may asa every morning eh. Tapos, hatarakimashita tapos na. Ano ba talaga? Tapos na ba siya or kasalukuyang ginagawa? It puts the listener into a dilemma. Okay? So, perhaps baka hatarakimash siya. Hindi naman talaga hatarakimashita. Or perhaps baka, let's say, kino, yesterday, di ba? So, kino, rokuji ni hatarakimashita. Yesterday, at 6 a.m., I work or have started working. Diba? Started work. Past tense kasi, sorry. For that, no? So, make sure that our time expression is in harmony with the verb. Okay? Next. Next po. Okay. Next one. Okay. So we are done with particle ni. And again, particle ni is only used to express time expressions with specific time. Pag sinabing specific time, ito yung may number. Pag wala number, wag nyo na siyang lagyan ng particle ni. Diretso. Okay. Another context here. Sir, paano kapag mga Friday, Monday, or in days of the week? Okay. For that, pwede siyang wala or pwedeng meron. Pero para mapadali ng buhay nyo, huwag nyo nalagyan. Pwede namang wala. Diba? So, ganun siya. Now, what about kara and made? So, parang particle ni din to. Okay. Now, kara and made is unique from particle ni. Bakit? Kasi later explain ko siya baka siya unique. Pero ang function niya rin, it also marks the place and time. For this lesson 4, it marks the time. Lesson 5, it marks the place. Okay. So, particle kara indicates the starting time or place. It's equivalent of the English from. So, meaning to say, you would want to emphasize that this time is your starting time. Example, may asa rokuji kara hatarakimasu. It has the same meaning on our previous statement. Balikan natin. Our previous statement is may asa rokuji ni hatarakimasu. Okay, which I'm working every morning at 6 a.m. Now, if I change it or change the particle ni to kara, it has the same meaning. May asa rokuji kara hatarakimasu. Now, if you ask me, bakit pa kailangan palitan siya? Pwede naman pala ni, pwede naman palang kara. Okay, the logic here, if you add kara, you are stating a starting timing to say you are definite that the 6 a.m. is your point of time which you begin the action. Okay. Now, for rokuji ni hatarakimasu, we just assume, okay, out of logic, that it is the time you start working. But it is unspecified. Hindi talaga siya nag-indicate na 6 talaga siya. Okay, because ni could be used for both describing starting time and the ending time. Okay, so now Just like kara, we have a particle made for equivalent version to to or until. So indicates the endpoint of the time or place. Example, may asa rokuji made hatarakimasu. Okay, so it completely makes the sentence into a different perspective. Okay, so every morning, uh, parang translation niya, it will be, previously, ito siya, no? Every morning, I work at 6. Every morning, I start work at 6 a.m. So meaning to say, you start working at 6 a.m. every morning. Now, dito naman, parang call center ka na. So you end your day or you end your work every morning at 6 a.m. So baliktad. Okay? So parang it really um, brings out a different perspective of the sentence by changing your particle. Okay? So galing, no? So parang change yung particle from this perspective, naging ganito yung perspective mo. Noong umpisa, araw-araw ko nagtatrabaho at 6 a.m. Ngayon, araw-araw ako na, or umaga ako, or tuwing umaga ako natatapos sa work. So parang different perspective siya. Okay? So, and just like, okay, the English from and to, you can combine it. Okay? Basta make sure lang that you're describing the starting point and then followed by kara, and then ending point followed by made. So palaging ganun tayo, no? Always remember that the particle describe the noun, the adverb, or the adjective it precedes. Okay. So noun, adjective, or whatever din describe niya, tapos particle. Okay. So for this example, Mainichi gosen rokuji kara gogo sanji made hatarakimasu. Have noticed that I've already included gosen gogo. Kasi nga, ang ginamit ko is Mainichi, which is every day. So every day, hindi natin alam kung gosen siya or gogo. Okay. Unlike may asa, automatically gosen. Okay. So, kailan siya nag-start? If we ask, let's say, let's ask the audience, let's say, Nanji kara hatarakimasu ka? So what time do you start? Nanji kara hatarakimasu ka? Of course, the answer would be gosen rokuji kara hatarakimasu, which I start working at 6 a.m. in the morning. Or babaliktad naman, you want to know the end time or yung until time niya or yung kanyang endpoint sa time. So question would be, Nanji made hatarakimasu ka? Until what time they work? Okay. So your answer would be gogo sanji made hatarakimasu. Okay. So meaning to say, it creates an expression of duration. Okay. Mainichi gosen shichichi kara. So from 6 a.m. gogo sanji made hatarakimasu to 3 p.m. So beginning to 6 to 3. So that's a time expression. Now, of course, syempre, may option naman kayong huwag kayong gumamit ng ganitong sentence. Medyo mahaba siya at medyo mahirap mag-compute ng math. Kung nahihirapan yung kausap mo, you can simply say, Mainichi hachiji kan ni hatarakimasu. Okay. So, paano? Mainichi hachiji kan. Kan, diba? Jikan, which is duration. And then you have to add particle ni because that is a specific time. So, Mainichi hachiji kan ni hatarakimasu. Okay. So, ganun po, no? So, it means to say, every day I work 8 hours a day. So, ganun lang naman siya. Every day I work 8 hours a day, or every day I work 8 hours a day. So, parang, or yan, tama na may expression ko. Okay. So, doubtful lang ako. Ayun. So, to sum it up, okay, sample pa. Nihongo no benkyou wa 8 kara desu. So, ano na notice nyo? Tama. Okay. So, ito, pag des siya, pwede ka pa rin gumamit ng kara. Okay. Diba? So, example, Japanese language study is from 8 o'clock. So, meaning to say, it started at 8 o'clock. Okay? So, syempre, morning siguro yan. So, you have to remind yourself na kahit des ang ginagamit mo, you have to use kara, which is, hindi siya pwede sa ni. You have to remember that ni only works with verb, the form of the verb, or the mass form of the verb. Okay? Hindi siya pwedeng ginagamit sa des kasi may asa, rokuji, ni des. That's wrong. Okay, totally wrong. It should be may asa, rokuji, des. Okay? But it makes no sense since it's not totally, the sentence is not totally complete. Okay? So, yun po siya. Okay? Next. Nihongo no benkyo wa nanji made desu ka? So of course, it's asking you what time will you finish your Japanese study. So Japanese language study is until what time? So see, made could also be used with this. Okay. So to summarize it up, okay? So kara is used as an alternative for ni, and made could be also used as an alternative for ni. And vice versa, pwede rin naman ni instead of kara or made. Now, of course, what's the advantage of using ni? Ni is general. It could also means your starting point or your ending point. For example, for the word hajime mashite, haji or hajime mas, diba? Hajime mas. Okay, obviously, since the verb is to begin, it means to say that the time there is the starting time. Okay. Likewise, if you mention owarimas, which means to say to end or to complete, basically the time expression there would be the end point. No, so without further indicating it using kara or mate. Okay, that's the ambiguity of the ni. Kasi ni kasi pwede siyang any time or any reference of time. Now, the beauty of kara and made, if you want to emphasize the end and the starting point, both for the time and the place, you can use particle kara and made. Now, in essence, generally for place and time, which is lesson 5, kasunod nito, ni could be used. Okay, so ganun lang naman siya. So for Japanese speaker, if they want to emphasize the starting time, kara. If they want to emphasize the ending time, made. Now, if they don't want, or it's totally makes no sense to emphasize, it's either obvious or it's already understood in the context, they could use ni. Okay. Example. Marami pa tayong example dyan. Example. Nihongo no benkyo wa hachiji ni hachiji ni hajimemasu. Diba? Parang obvious naman kasi, diba, hajimemasu na siya. So, meaning to say, starting point yun. So, pag ginawa ko warimasu, again, ending point yun. What about kung generic lang siya? Let's say, hatarakimasu. Oshigoto wa hachiji ni hatarakimasu. Ang work ko, or my work, 8 o'clock, ano daw. So, syempre, logically, I will assume that would be your starting time, diba? Without any hesitation whatsoever na isipin ko siguro ano siya. Kasi, yun ang logical assumption namin. Now, if you want to emphasize, that's really good, you can use kara instead of ni. Okay? So, yun lang na may minor differentiation nila. And of course, syempre, pag particle ni and time, it should be matched with a verb mass form. Okay, meaning to say it should be used together, or the ni should be used in together with the mass form. Now for kara and made, that's optional. Okay, or pwedeng wala or pwedeng des lang. Okay, so kasi that's expression. Okay, so hopefully it's clear to you. So if you have question, please don't hesitate to comment down if you have any observation or anything that bothers you with this lesson. So please feel free to comment down below. And first, of course, syempre, I really read these comments para I could further improve your study in Japanese. So yun lang. Minasan, お疲れ様でした。ありがとうございます。